If you're a DM long enough, eventually you'll probably get a hankering to create your own custom monster. You've reskinned one or two monsters maybe, or did a little mix and match between equal seeming powers and abilities, but what if you want to make your own terrifying creature from the ground up? Well, it can be intimidating and the text in the DM guide for this is a little daunting. So in this video, I'll walk you through the whole process as we create a new custom monster, the Kok'ain Bear. Note how this is spelled, and that it is no way the portrayal of any intellectual property belonging to any movie company. I'm Dave, and this is the one and only RPG Rundown. Before we get started building a Kok'ain Bear, let's talk about how Wizards of the Coast designs monsters for D&D. Now, they have what amounts to a secret formula that they have not shared outside of the company for building monsters, and that formula differs from what is given to us in the DM guide for creating our own. They've even changed that secret formula with the release of Monsters of the Multiverse, but have still kept it secret. So a big caveat is a monster you create using the DMG formula may or may not be balanced and have a reliable challenge rating. Insert joke about WotC's monsters already not having reliable CR ratings. So if you create your own monster, be sure to playtest it a few times before unleashing it in your regular campaign. See how it goes against a party set to the target CR, then make adjustments and test again. Chapter 9 of the Dungeon Master's Guide has the rules for creating monsters. They begin with a table called Monster Statistics by Challenge Rating, showing the average hit points, attack bonuses, damage output, armor class, and save DCs for CRs from 0 to 30. This table is your central reference for your monster creation, and we will refer to it a lot. Now, creating a monster like this is different than creating a classed character like you do for player characters, or you might do for some NPCs. Since monsters are generally intended for combat encounters and aren't going to level up, we aren't building this thing to change scale. It does the damage it does, and it has the HP it has. So we don't begin with core ability stats like we do for classed characters. This exercise is much more straightforward than that. If you want a simple monster with no skill or saving throw proficiencies, you don't even need to go further than just using this table to arrive at core stats and deciding what attacks and weapons the monster has that can do your target range of damage output based on that table for the CR that you're trying to hit. You don't have to worry about doing modifier math to arrive at the attack bonus, armor class, hit points, and so forth. When it comes to these values, you simply decide what they are and record them. So, for example, you don't need to worry about a con stat adding to the HP. The monster just has the HP you give it for the CR you want, so this is why you don't really need core stats for a quick monster idea that you don't intend to publish. This table is really handy even for just creating some arbitrary monster right on the spot during gameplay if you need to. Choose the appropriate CR for your party, decide the specific amount of hit points in the range given, choose some weapons that do the appropriate amount of average damage per round shown in the table, and you're ready to go. It's even easier with natural weapons because they just do the amount of damage you say they do, so you don't even need to do quick math to pick a manufactured weapon such as a type of sword. But if you do want to fully flesh the monster out, like the monsters which do appear in the monster manual, and especially if you want to give it proficiency in some skills or saving throws, then you'll need to also go through the section called Creating a Monster Stat Block, which expands on this further. But do be sure to read the Creating Quick Monster Stats section first. Now, you can mix and match different target numbers from different CRs in that table. For example, if you want, say, the AC and HP from the CR1 line, but for concept reasons you want the monster to do more damage than a typical CR1 monster, there are rules for adjusting the CR between them. In this case, you go ahead and pick a starting CR, flesh out the rest of the character's stats, and then look at the rules for arriving at the final CR later in this section. But if you do this in a certain way, you can make it easier on yourself. If you look at the heading for this table, you'll see that some of the stats are grouped into offensive and some into defensive categories. If you keep both of your defensive stats in one CR and all three of your offensive stats in another, then the only adjustment you'll have to do is arrive at the average between the two of them. But if you get more complex than that, say with an attack bonus from one CR but average damage per round from another, you have a bit more adjusting to do. We'll take a look at that later in the video. In the description is a link to the final version of the monster I created, and I went through several iterations while working with it and really understanding these rules to a decent level, so note that if you happen to look at the previous versions, they're a little all over the place. All right, now let's build a Kok'ain Bear. All jokes aside, this bear was definitely inspired by a certain movie. My goals for this creature are driven by the movie Bear. Here are the qualities of the movie Bear that I wanted in my monster. It's powered by some kind of rage, Probably chemically induced. Its rage is somehow contagious, reflecting the spread of cocaine in the movie to the heroes being affected by it. It is surprisingly sneaky for its size. Sometimes it just appears right beside a character and attacks. It is also highly perceptive due to being on a powerful stimulant. It sometimes pounces on its prey. Sometimes its own rage exhausts it, and it passes out. This is a fantasy concept, and I wanted the bear's rage to somehow be permanent but also transmittable. So instead of an external substance like cocaine inducing the rage, I decided the bear produces this substance internally. At first, I thought it would be hormones or pheromones of some kind, but ultimately realized this is fantasy, not biology class, so I settled on just calling it the coca humors. The bear has an organ that produces the coca humors, and coca humors induce the dreaded coca rage. The bear can also spray the humors out as an attack, potentially passing the rage to other creatures who are driven to attack every round at the nearest target, friend, foe, or otherwise. Although the idea started as a bit of a humorous angle for this video, I decided I also wanted the level 8 party from my home game to encounter the Kok'ain Bear. I also wanted them to encounter the creature by itself, so I concluded a CR10 would probably work well. This is because multiple characters are more effective against a single enemy than the CR indicates, solely by nature of the players as a group having more attacks per round. All right, now let's take it through the formula. Steps 1 through 4 in the DMG are pretty straightforward. Doing those, I come up with these facts. Name, Kok'ain Bear. Size, large. Type, monstrosity. Alignment, chaotic evil. The bear from the movie is more like size medium, but I wanted my fantasy take on it to be something bizarre and powerfully intimidating, so it felt appropriate to make it bigger than a regular D&D black or brown bear. Also to make it a challenge for heroes, not just some poor regular folk wandering in the woods, like in the movie. So this is essentially a form of a dire bear, sort of similar to an owl bear, but a lot more powerful. I made it a monstrosity rather than a natural animal, because its natural range ability is also meant to be larger than life. The very idea of a permanently raging animal that can knock itself out seems beyond what nature might produce. Next comes step 5, ability scores. And the only rules for monster ability scores are that they can't be lower than 1 or greater than 30 in any ability. This gives you so much choice, it's hard to know where to start, but breaking it down a little makes it feel less overwhelming. First, you want to think about any skills or saves you want the creature to have, and what the final bonus would be for these. I wanted Kok'ain Bear to be highly perceptive, so I gave it an 18 wisdom. I also knew I wanted it to have a high con save, so I gave it a 17 con. To come up with the other stats, you can look at a roughly comparable monster for a starting point. My example was the owl bear. It has a strength of 20, dex of 12, and a charisma of 7. I used the same strength and dex stats for Kok'ain Bear, but chose to go for an even lower charisma of 2. This is because I want Kok'ain Bear to be even more off-putting than the owl bear. I picture it with its tongue drooling, eyes lolling, and erratic movements, all from the coca rage. So now we have our core ability stats. Next is step 6, the expected challenge rating. I wanted this to be 10, and in this step we note the proficiency bonus for the suggested CR by looking it up in our trusty monster stats by challenge rating table. The table lists a proficiency of +4 for CR10, so we jot this down. Steps that come after this are about picking stats which appear on this table. For each type of stat, you can choose one from the value or range suggested by the table, or you can go above or below that, with the individual stat winding up with a different suggested CR. If you do this, just know that, as I previously mentioned, you may need to make adjustments and arrive at a different CR than the one you started with. Also, as previously mentioned, the adjustment is easier if you at least keep all the offensive stats in one CR and all the defensive stats in another. Of course, if you choose all of your stats from the line for your starting CR, you won't need to make any CR adjustments later. Okay, step 7 is choosing the armor class. I went ahead and took the suggested one for CR10, which is an AC of 17. The Coca Rage keeps the bear from being quite as affected by the damage as more sober creatures, so I decided that counted as armor type natural. In step 8, we determine max hit points. Looking at the table, the suggested range for CR10 is 206 to 220. I split the difference at 213 and went ahead and added the con bonus of 3. That was just a mental exercise to make it feel reasonable to me, but you really can just pick a number in the range. So anyway, the bear has max hit points of 216. You could also arrive at the max HP by assigning a hit dice type and quantity. And in fact, if you enter this monster into D&D Beyond's homebrew form, you are required to give these values. This is probably because another DM using your monster, per the game rules, should be able to roll for the max HP instead of taking the average that you list. So to satisfy this, I reverse engineered a bit from starting with 216. If a DM rolled for this monster's HP, I'd want it to be no lower than about 80. So now we consult a table called Hit Dice by Size, which suggests that for a large size monster, the hit die should be D10. 216 minus 80 is 136, and if we subtract the con bonus of 3, we're down to a target value average of 133 for the hit dice. To get there with average rolls of 5, on several D10s, we divide 136 by 5 to get about 27. So I just put down 27 D10 plus 80 for the hit dice. Now note that for this calculation, we do take the monster's con stat into account. So this is another reason you might choose to do the full stat block with ability scores and all. Because if you plan to make your homebrew monster publicly shared for use by others on D&D Beyond, or you want to publish it some other way, such as your own monster collection or bespoke adventure that you want to put out, well, the DM technically has a right to roll for the final hit points. Step 9 is determining any damage vulnerabilities, resistances, or immunities. The bear in the movie gets hit a lot without the attacks against it doing as much damage as it feels like they should, so that to me translated into resistance to non-magical, bludgeoning, slashing, and piercing damage. The guide says that when a monster has resistance or immunity to several types of damage, and especially the particular types that I chose, it has effective hit points higher than its actual HP. There's a table provided to come up with the multiplier used to arrive at the effective HP. Looking at this table, for my expected CR of 10, the multiplier for resistances is 1.5. This brings me to an effective HP value of 324, and I note this down for later when looking at adjusting the CR, since it is higher than what's suggested for CR 10. Next is Step 10, Attack Bonuses. I kept this simple and went with a suggestion in the stats by CR table, which was plus 7. Step 11 is Average Damage per round. For an expected CR of 10, damage per round should be between 63 and 68. So here's what I wound up with. I decided the bear has 2 attacks per round, a bite attack and a claw attack. I also decided I wanted to steal the pounce feature from the listing for a tiger. So if the bear moves at least 20 feet in a straight line toward a creature, and it hits that creature with a claw attack on the same turn, that target must make a strength check. If they fail, they are knocked prone, and the bear gets a free bite attack. Based on this, I did some fiddling with numbers to find combos of dice that would be within this range. I actually put a spreadsheet together to calculate the die type for damage from each of its attack, the number of dice to roll, and its damage bonus. I fiddled with the die types and dice quantities until I got into the range suggested for the CR. I arrived at 5d10 plus 7 for the bite attack and 5d8 plus 7 for the claw attack. The bonus comes from the bear's plus 5 strength modifier plus an arbitrary plus 2 for its Coca Rage. I could have just given the bear a 24 strength to arrive at the plus 7 bonus, but it made sense to me that the rage humors make it attack more aggressively, but don't really raise its base strength. It just likes to scrap, but that doesn't mean it can bust open a door as effectively as it can bite a chunk out of a tasty hero. And this is more or less a flavor thing, but I think it's not a bad idea to let your intuition guide you this way. And anyway, this won't change our CR since these values fall within what's suggested for it. So all of this means that if the bear gets its most potent combination out in one round, it will do an average damage of 87. This is one claw attack doing an average 23 slashing damage, one bite attack doing an average of 32 piercing damage, plus another average 32 piercing for the bonus bite after the pounce, for that total of 87. However, since the bear needs 20 feet of movement in a straight line before the pounce attack, it's not going to happen every round. It is most likely to happen in the first round. For situations with variable damage per round, the guide suggests taking an overall average across the first 3 rounds. If I average up one round with a bonus bite for the pounce attack, and then another pounce and claw attack at 87, and then 2 rounds with 1 bite and 1 claw attack in each at 55, I arrive at a rounded up 66. Now on to step 12, save DCs. I just took the suggested one from the stats by challenge table for a 16. Note that this is now the DC for not getting knocked prone by the bear's pounce attack. Step 13 is special traits, actions, and reactions. This is a big one for Kok'ain Bear, and I had a lot of fun with it. Here's where I added rules about the Coca Rage. The Coca Rage gives a creature everything that a Barbarian's Rage class ability does. Namely, a creature with Coca Rage has advantage on strength checks and saves, gets 1 extra damage die for any strength-related attacks, and has resistance to non-magical bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing attacks. Notably, a creature with Coca Rage also can't cast spells or keep concentration spells going, so this will be trouble for your big caster classes. And now, here are the most fun and nasty parts. First, every turn a creature has the Coca Rage, it must attack the nearest other creature. If there are multiple creatures that are equally closest, you determine the target randomly. It does not matter if the creature is friend or foe, the Rage doesn't care. The effect doesn't do any direct damage, but threatens a lot of chaos that might hurt the party fighting the bear. There's a problem here with figuring out how this might affect the CR, since we cannot predict what kind of creature will get the Rage, how much damage they can do, and how often they do it to friendly creatures. And due to this, it isn't really possible to cleanly factor this action into the CR at all. But it was such a fun idea, and really, this is the most unique thing about this monster, so I really wanted to put it in. I figured I'll tweak it in playtesting if it's too powerful, as it might be. Second, at the end of every turn, the creature makes another DC 16 con save. If they succeed, the Coca Rage has run its course and their system crashes. They fall unconscious, but not dying, for D4 rounds. On a fail, they gain a level of exhaustion, but the Rage continues. This means Coca Rage is potentially deadly if the PC fails enough saves to get 6 exhaustion levels. This might also wreak havoc with CR. To keep a decent lid on it, I made it a recharge 5 to 6 attack, but we'll still keep an eye on it as we continue. Step 14 is speed. Because of its internally produced humors, the bear has a speed of 40. The movie also makes a bit of a joke out of the fact that the bear can climb trees when one of the characters thought it couldn't, and seemingly faster than they expect. So I also gave Kok'ain Bear a climb speed of 40. Step 15 is saving throw bonuses. Since the Coca Rage makes the bear unusually tough, I gave it a con save. This will also help the bear not collapse so often from its own system crashing. Step 16 is final challenge rating. At this point, everything except the effective hit points is in the suggested range for CR10. But with an effective HP max of 324, we find the suggested CR for that to be a whopping 17. Now, if I still wanted to keep the HP at this value, and I was okay with a CR higher than 10, I'd need to do some fiddly rules math to arrive at a point between 10 and 17. And there are rules for this in the book. They're slightly crunchy, but basically involve looking at the difference between these two CRs and raising the final CR 1 point for every 2 points of difference. But I really don't want a higher CR, so instead I go back and reduce my hit points so that the effective HP will fall in line with CR 10. I do some more reverse engineering math based on that multiplier of 1.5 and arrive at 140 actual HP. Now I also need to change the hit dice stats, so doing this, I get 10d10 plus 80. Now that I've made my adjustments, all my stats fall within the table's suggestions for a CR10, so I won't need to do any adjusting. But there might be reasons you want to deviate from some of the values suggested for your starting CR. Maybe you want a glass cannon type of monster with huge attacks but low hit points, because you want to scare your party but then enjoy their relief when this thing dies fast. To do that, there are rules listed in the DMG in this section for making those adjustments. They're all similar to the example I gave with the HP. You wind up looking at the difference in CRs between the conflicting stats and adjusting levels guided by that, then taking the average between offensive and defensive CRs you ultimately wind up with. Note that your proficiency bonus must always be aligned with your final CR, so if you do wind up with an adjusted CR, just make sure you note that the new proficiency bonus is the one from the final CR. This will affect any skill or saving throw bonuses you opt for in the next steps. Now for step 17, choosing skill bonuses. Here you're basically choosing what skills the monster can add its proficiency bonus to. The bear in the movie seemed to have heightened senses, so I chose to give Kok'ain Bear proficiency with the perception skill. The bear also suddenly appears right beside characters a fair amount, so I gave the monster version proficiency in stealth as well. I even considered giving it Misty Step to lend a supernatural air to it, but ultimately decided that was too much. It's a monstrosity for sure, but not really magical. Step 18 is assigning condition immunities, and nothing here seemed to apply, so I moved on. Step 19 is special senses, and simply because it amused me, I gave the bear blind sight. It is just so jacked up on its Coca humors it can almost see through time itself. Step 20, languages didn't really apply. The bear doesn't speak, so I skipped that one. And at this point, the first draft of our monster is finished. But let's go back and see if it needs any tweaking. One thing I notice is that the spray action is potentially really deadly, so let's address that. We'll adjust the description so that failed con saves can only result in a maximum of 5 levels of exhaustion, stopping short of a character being killed by it. But I also think that failing the con save that many times should temporarily incapacitate a character, so I'm writing in that upon reaching exhaustion level 5 from this effect, the character drops unconscious for 1d4 plus 1 hours. Creatures that are not Kok'ain Bear just crash harder on the come down. After this time, the Koka humors are gone from their system and the Koka Rage is removed. Let's also think about how a character could be saved from the Koka Rage by another character. It makes sense that any restoration spell will get rid of this condition, but I'm also feeling generous about this one and adding that any magical healing would also remove the Koka Rage, so I'll add that into the attack's description as well. And that does it for our first draft of Kok'ain Bear. I've added the link to its homebrew listing in D&D Beyond in this video's description. Have you created your own custom monster, or do you have an idea for one? Let me know in the comments. And until next time, may all your 20s be natural. Hey, thanks for watching this video. Of course, it always helps us out if you like and subscribe. And check this video's description for a link to a few other cool things from Game Talk Network. Links to other channels in the Game Talk Network, like the Board Game Rundown, the Miniatures Rundown, and the Lorcana Rundown. A link to our Patreon for the Game Talk Network, where RPG Rundown is one of the pledge levels you can select. And a link to our GTN Discord server. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.